I stood in the grand living room of the Harrisons, feeling like a misplaced piece in an elaborate puzzle. The high ceilings, adorned with crystal chandeliers, seemed to amplify the distance between me and them, not just in space, but in everything else that mattered. Victoria Harrison, my future mother-in-law, was the epitome of grace and poise, moving through the room like a queen amongst her subjects. But her eyes, sharp and discerning, had always lingered on me with an unspoken disapproval. I often wondered if it was my simpler background or something else about me that she found so distasteful. Michael, my fiancé, squeezed my hand reassuringly as if sensing my discomfort. He whispered, "Don't let her get to you, Emma. You're perfect as you are." But his words, though comforting, couldn't shield me from what was to come. As the evening wore on, the guests mingled, sipping champagne and sharing laughs. I tried to blend in, but my attempts felt increasingly futile. Then Victoria approached me, her gaze cold and unyielding. "Emma, dear," she began, her voice laced with feigned sweetness, "you must understand, some pieces just don't fit, no matter how much you want them to." Her words stung, more so because I knew what she meant. I wasn't like them, not in upbringing, wealth, or status, and in her eyes I never would be. I felt Michael's grip tighten on my hand, his jaw clenched. He had always been caught in the middle, torn between his love for me and the expectations of his family. As Victoria glided away, leaving her words hanging like a dark cloud, I realized this was just the beginning. The battle lines were drawn, and I was the unwanted soldier in a war I never wanted to fight. The engagement dinner for Charlotte, Michael's sister, was in full swing. The room buzzed with conversation and laughter, the air filled with the scent of gourmet dishes yet to be served. I tried to stay at the periphery, nursing a glass of wine, hoping to avoid any unwanted attention. Charlotte was radiant, her happiness infectious, even to me. I couldn't help but feel a pang of longing, wishing for a moment of such uncomplicated joy with Michael. But our relationship was never just ours. It was always under the scrutinizing gaze of the Harrisons. As the evening progressed, the wait for dinner seemed to stretch endlessly. To pass the time, guests mingled, moving in and out of groups. I found myself in a conversation with Thomas, Charlotte's fiancé, and another gentleman I barely knew. The topic was innocuous, something about a recent art exhibition. When the other gentleman excused himself, Thomas and I continued our chat. He was easy to talk to, and for a brief moment, I forgot the eyes that constantly judged me. That was my mistake. Victoria's sister, Eleanor, saw us. Her eyes narrowed, and before I knew it, she was off, presumably to fetch Victoria. A sense of foreboding washed over me. Victoria approached us with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What's so amusing here?" she asked, her tone suggesting that whatever it was, it couldn't possibly be appropriate. Thomas, oblivious to the undercurrents, cheerfully shared the topic of our conversation. But I could see in Victoria's eyes that she had already made up her mind about what she thought was happening. The evening spiraled from there. Victoria whispered to Charlotte, her words like venom, spreading doubt and suspicion. She painted a picture of me as a flirt, a woman who couldn't be trusted, even suggesting that Thomas and I were sharing more than just conversation. I watched in horror as Charlotte's face fell. The joy of the evening was replaced by a cloud of mistrust. Michael tried to defend me, arguing that it was all a misunderstanding, but the damage was done. The family I had hoped to call my own now looked at me with cold eyes, judging me for a crime I hadn't committed. The label of homewrecker was thrust upon me without a trial, and I stood there, helpless, my character assassinated by the woman who should have been my future mother-in-law. The days following the engagement dinner were like navigating through a minefield. The once warm and inviting Harrison home now felt cold and hostile. Charlotte, whom I had considered a friend, avoided me, her eyes filled with hurt and suspicion. The rumor had spread like wildfire, not just within the family, but among our circle of friends. I was labeled a seductress, a woman who would stoop to any low to secure her place in the Harrison dynasty. Every polite smile, every friendly conversation I had ever had was now being reinterpreted through this malicious lens. Michael was my only solace during this storm. He stood by me, unwavering in his belief in my innocence. But even his support couldn't shield me from the glares and the whispers that followed me around. I felt isolated, a pariah in a world I had never fully been accepted into. The weight of the accusations bore down on me, crushing my spirit. I began to question myself, wondering if I had inadvertently given the wrong impression, if I was somehow at fault for this misunderstanding. Then came the message from Charlotte. She wanted to meet, just the two of us. A part of me dreaded the confrontation, but another part clung to the hope that I could somehow fix this, that I could make her see the truth. As I prepared for the meeting, I knew I had to tread carefully. Directly accusing Victoria of lying would only alienate Charlotte further. I had to be subtle, to help her see the pattern of manipulation that her mother was so adept at. The meeting was set in a quiet cafe, away from prying eyes. I arrived early, my hands shaking slightly as I clutched my coffee cup, waiting for Charlotte to arrive. This was my chance to clear my name, to salvage what was left of my relationship with Michael's family. But deep down, I knew it was about more than that. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my self-worth. As Charlotte walked in, our eyes met. Gone was the warmth we once shared, replaced by a guarded wariness. The next hour would determine much more than just the fate of our relationship. It would be a test of my strength, my resolve, and my ability to stand up against the unfounded prejudices that threatened to tear my world apart. The cafe was quaint, a stark contrast to the opulent world of the Harrisons. As Charlotte sat across from me, her fingers nervously tapping on the table, I could sense the tension emanating from her. She was torn, caught between loyalty to her family and the remnants of our friendship. "Emma," she began hesitantly, "this situation is complicated. I want to believe you, I really do. But my mom, she seemed so certain." Her words hung in the air, a testament to the influence Victoria wielded over her children. I took a deep breath, choosing my words with care. This wasn't just about clearing my name, it was about helping Charlotte see the truth. "Charlotte, I understand your position," I replied, my voice steady. "But you know me. Have I ever given you any reason to doubt my character, my intentions?" She looked down, a frown creasing her brow. "No, you haven't. But my mom, she wouldn't lie about something like this, would she?" The question was loaded, a delicate balance between truth and tact. "I think sometimes people see what they want to see," I said softly. "And maybe, just maybe, your mom saw a chance to push me away, to protect what she thinks is best for the family." Charlotte's eyes met mine, a flicker of realization dawning in them. "You think she made this up because she doesn't want you with Michael?" I nodded, gently. "I can't tell you what to believe, Charlotte, but I can ask you to consider the possibility. Has your mom ever done something like this before? Perhaps not as extreme, but something that shows her need to control?" She was silent for a moment, lost in thought. Then, slowly, she began to speak. She talked about her mother's subtle manipulations, the way she would steer conversations and opinions to suit her agenda. As she spoke, I could see the walls of denial beginning to crumble. Our conversation continued, moving from the incident at the dinner to broader reflections on family dynamics and expectations. It was a cathartic experience for both of us, a chance to air grievances and misunderstandings. As we parted ways, Charlotte's final words stayed with me. "I'll think about what you said, Emma. I'm sorry for jumping to conclusions. Maybe we need to look at things differently." Walking away from the cafe, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead was still fraught with challenges, but perhaps this was the first step towards mending broken bridges. The fight for my place in Michael's life and in his family was far from over. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. In the weeks that followed my meeting with Charlotte, the atmosphere in the Harrison household subtly shifted. Charlotte's demeanor towards me softened, a sign that our conversation had sparked a change. However, Victoria's coldness remained as impenetrable as ever. An opportunity to address the lies head-on presented itself unexpectedly. The Harrisons were hosting a charity event, and as Michael's fiancée, I was obligated to attend. I knew this event would be crucial. It was my chance to confront the situation without directly accusing Victoria. As guests mingled in the lavishly decorated ballroom, I found myself in a conversation with a small group that included Victoria and some of her close acquaintances. The topic of trust within families came up, a subject too apt to be a coincidence. "I believe trust is the cornerstone of any healthy family," I said, my gaze meeting Victoria's for a brief moment. Without it, we're just strangers living under the same roof. Victoria smiled thinly, catching the hidden barb in my words. Of course, Emma, but trust must be earned, and once broken, it's not easily repaired. Her words, laced with insinuation, were a clear reference to the rumors she had spread. I felt a surge of anger, but maintained my composure. That's true, I replied evenly. But sometimes misunderstandings happen. What's important is being open to the truth, even if it's not what we initially believed. The conversation around us continued, but the message was clear. We were engaged in a silent battle, a war of words and implications. While I couldn't outright accuse Victoria without causing a scene, I had made my stance clear. As the evening progressed, I noticed a few guests glancing at me with curiosity rather than judgment. It seemed that the seeds of doubt I had planted were beginning to sprout. The truth was a powerful weapon, and I had wielded it with precision. But the victory, if it could be called that, was bittersweet. I knew that Victoria would not give up easily. The fight for my place in Michael's life was far from over. But I had made a statement that night. I wasn't going to be a passive victim in Victoria's game of manipulation. As Michael and I left the event, his hand in mine, I felt a renewed sense of determination. The road ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to face it head-on. The lies and deceit would eventually unravel, and when they did, I would be standing strong, vindicated by the truth. Time has a way of unraveling the most intricate of lies, and, in the weeks that followed the charity event, the undercurrents within the Harrison family began to change. My relationship with Charlotte had improved significantly, and through her, I started to see a shift in the family's perception of me. It was at a casual family gathering where I felt the first real signs of change. The atmosphere was lighter, and conversations flowed more freely. I was cautiously optimistic, but still acutely aware of Victoria's lingering disapproval. During the gathering, I had a chance to speak with some of the family members who had initially been swayed by Victoria's narrative. As we talked, I realized they were seeing me in a new light. There were no overt apologies, but the change in their demeanor was apology enough. What surprised me most, however, was a conversation with Michael's cousin, James. He pulled me aside, his expression serious. "Emma, I need to tell you something," he began. "I overheard my Aunt Victoria talking to Eleanor a while back. They were plotting, saying things about you, about how to keep you away from Michael." His revelation was a shock, yet not entirely unexpected. It was the confirmation I needed, undeniable proof of Victoria's manipulations. "Thank you for telling me, James," I said, my mind racing with the implications of this new information. As the gathering continued, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. The truth was finally coming to light, and with it, the possibility of a new beginning. But I also knew that this revelation would have its consequences. Later, in the privacy of our home, I shared James's revelation with Michael. He was furious, his sense of betrayal by his mother palpable. "I can't believe she would go this far," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "We need to confront her, Michael. She can't keep doing this," I replied, my resolve firm. We decided to plan a family meeting, a confrontation where everything would be laid out in the open. It was a risky move, but it was time to end Victoria's reign of manipulation and deceit. The night before the meeting, I lay awake thinking about the journey that had brought me to this point. It had been painful, filled with trials and tribulations, but it had also made me stronger, more resilient. I was ready for whatever the next day would bring. The truth was on my side, and it was time for it to be heard. The day of the family meeting arrived, a day that would either mend or irreparably fracture the Harrison family. The air was thick with tension as we gathered in the living room, the same room where I had felt so out of place months ago. Michael and I sat together, a united front against the storm that was about to unfold. Across from us, Victoria sat, her composure impeccable as always, but I could sense a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Michael took the lead, his voice steady but charged with emotion. "We're here because there are things that need to be addressed, truths that need to be spoken," he began, his gaze sweeping across the room. "Emma has been accused and judged unfairly, and it's time we clear the air." The room fell silent, every eye fixed on us. I took a deep breath and shared James's revelation, the words heavy with the weight of betrayal. As I spoke, I watched Victoria's facade crack, her mask of aristocratic poise slipping for the first time. The reactions around the room varied. Some were shocked, others seemed to have expected such deceit. Charlotte looked at her mother, hurt and confusion written across her face. Victoria, now cornered, tried to defend herself. "I did what I thought was best for this family," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You don't understand what's at stake." "It's not about the family, Victoria," Michael interjected, his disappointment clear. "It's about control, about you not accepting Emma." The discussion that followed was intense and emotional. Accusations and confessions poured out, opening old wounds but also paving the way for healing. Victoria, once the puppeteer, now looked diminished, her schemes laid bare for all to see. As the meeting drew to a close, there was a sense of catharsis in the room. Some bridges were mended, while others remained fragile. But the most significant outcome was the shift in how I was viewed by the family. The label of homewrecker was gone, replaced by a newfound respect and acceptance. Victoria's reign of manipulation had ended, her tactics exposed and denounced. It was a triumph not just for me but for the entire family, a chance to rebuild on a foundation of truth and understanding. As Michael and I walked back to our car, he wrapped his arm around me. "I'm proud of you," he said, his words filled with love and admiration. I smiled, feeling a sense of achievement. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but for now, I had triumphed over the lies and deceit. I had reclaimed my dignity, and in doing so I had changed the dynamics of the Harrison family forever. The seasons changed, and with them, the Harrison family slowly transformed. The engagement dinner that had once been a stage for scandal now seemed like a distant memory, a dark chapter come to a close. In the warmth of the Harrison home, once more gathered for a celebration, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that brought us to this moment. The room was filled with laughter and conversation, a stark contrast to the events that had unfolded months prior. Charlotte, now married and happier than ever, shared a tender glance with Thomas, their unity unmarred by past rumors. Even Eleanor, once an unwitting accomplice in Victoria's schemes, approached me with a shy smile and a heartfelt apology. As for Victoria, the matriarch who had orchestrated so much pain, her presence was subdued. She was no longer the queen of her domain, but rather a spectator in her own home. Her attempts to regather the shattered pieces of her influence were met with a quiet but firm resistance from the family she had once controlled. Michael held my hand as we mingled, his pride in me evident in the way he introduced me to new faces and old friends alike. Our bond had strengthened in the crucible of his family's drama, tempered by the trials we had faced together. "Emma," he said, as we found a quiet moment by the window, "I can't believe we made it through all of this." I turned to him, my heart full. "We did it together," I replied. "And look at us now, stronger and more united than ever." The future that lay before us was one of hope and possibility. The Harrisons, once a family divided by class, deceit, and manipulation, had begun to heal. For my part, I had carved out my place among them, not as an outsider, but as a cherished member of the family. As the evening continued, I found myself lost in thought. The struggles I had endured with the Harrisons had taught me more about myself than I could have imagined. I had learned to stand up for what was right, to fight against injustice, and to trust in the enduring strength of love. The final conversation of the evening was with Victoria, a moment I had anticipated with a mix of anxiety and hope. As we stood together, an unspoken truce settled between us. "Emma," Victoria said, her voice softer than I had ever heard it, "I was wrong about you." The admission was brief, a mere whisper against the backdrop of celebration, but it was enough. It was the epilogue to our shared story, an acknowledgement of change and the promise of a better tomorrow. The Harrisons would move forward, with me as an integral part of their legacy. And as the last guests departed, the candles casting a soft glow on the now empty room, I realized that this was truly a new beginning, a beginning filled with respect, understanding, and most importantly, a family united, not just by blood, but by a shared journey through darkness into the light.